Dear Governor Kevin Stitt, admittedly, I have done some stupid things in my life, and I am ashamed, embarrassed, and repentant of my youthful actions. But as God is my witness, I was not involved in any way in the crimes that led to Paul Howell being shot and killed on July 28, 1999. I've spent the past 20 years on death row for a crime I did not commit, did not witness, and was not at. I feel terrible for Mr. Howell and his family, but I was not responsible. I did not have a chance to tell my story to the jury at my trial because my lawyers rested the case without calling any witnesses, including my mother, father, sister, and brother, who would have told the jury I was home with them when the crime was committed. Today, I deeply regret my youthful involvement with the people responsible for Mr. Howell's death, and I wish I had just gone and spoken to the police when I heard they were looking for me. If I did that, I don't think I'd be where I am now. While I wished I had gone to the police with what I knew, I was scared to get involved. I was like other young black men in my neighborhood, afraid of the police, and I didn't trust them. I regret not coming forward with what I learned after Mr. Howell's murder, and that my silence meant that those actually responsible for his death are now walking free.
Between 11 and 11:30 p.m. that evening, Chris finally picked me up and we drove to my apartment in Norman. Chris and I had words because he was so late. Chris told me he got into it with some guys and shot at them. I was shocked, but didn't ask any questions. My thought at the time was, the less I knew, the better. After picking up some clean clothes back at my apartment, Chris and I left Norman at around 2 a.m. and headed back to Oklahoma City.
Liddell kept asking me if I knew where Chris was. When I got to Liddell's apartment, he asked me to follow him in a Suburban that was parked there. That made me suspicious, and I refused because I was pretty sure the Suburban was stolen based on stories I had heard about Liddell and how he would steal cars and change serial numbers. Liddell instead drove the Suburban and I followed him in his car. Liddell parked the Suburban at a grocery store and went inside. After a minute, I went into the store. I don't remember if Liddell bought anything. We left the store and drove together in his Firebird to an auto shop. I later learned, after I was arrested, that the auto shop was a chop shop run by a man named Kermit Lottie. Liddell went into the garage while I waited in the car.
Liddell returned 10 or 15 minutes later and looked spooked. We drove in silence back to the grocery store where the Suburban was parked, and Liddell just sat parked behind it for several moments as if thinking. Liddell said the garage didn't want the Suburban because there was a body on the truck or something like that. I didn't know what he was talking about, but I had a bad feeling. I should have bolted and gone to the police, but I didn't. It was then that I learned that someone had been killed the night before in a robbery of a Suburban. I think that at that point, things were starting to add up to me that Liddell and Chris were involved. I should have gone to the police, but I didn't. That was stupid, and I regret it. But I was becoming concerned for my and my family's safety. After midnight on Friday, Chris called and asked me to pick him up at a laundromat because he had locked out his grandmother's house. He was insistent. Because he had left his car at my parents' house, I took his car to pick him up and we drove back to my parents' house. I went to the living room couch to watch TV and called some girls on the family phone and fell asleep. Chris said he needed to make calls and went upstairs to use the other phone line in my bedroom upstairs. Looking back, I'm sure that's when Chris hid the gun and bandana that the police later found in my room. By the time I woke up later Friday morning, Chris was gone. After cutting the grass, I was on the phone with a friend and received a call on the other line from Liddell. I later learned he was in police custody and calling me from outside my house. The call was short. Liddell asked what I was doing, and I told him I was talking to a girl. A second call came in, and the person on the other end of the phone asked if I was home. I knew something wasn't right, and I figured it had to do with Chris. I knew he was up to no good, but didn't want to be in the middle of it.
My lawyers didn't offer evidence demonstrating that I could not have been the shooter. At the trial, The only witness identified the shooter as having half an inch of hair sticking out from underneath a stocking cap. That couldn't have been me. A photo of me taken just days before the crime, on July 19, 1999, which was never shown to the jury, shows that I had short, closely cropped hair, not long enough to match the eyewitness's description of the shooter. Chris Jordan, on the other hand, who blamed me for the shooting and worked out a deal with prosecutors to testify against me, fit the description. A photo of Chris at the time shows that he had long hair, which would have stuck out from beneath a stocking cap. The jury was never shown that I couldn't have been the person identified by the eyewitnesses to the crime.
The state hid its deal with Chris Jordan. Chris pled guilty to first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a felony in connection with Mr. Howell's murder in exchange for testifying against me on behalf of the prosecution. At my trial, Chris lied and testified that I murdered Mr. Howell. Chris Jordan admitted that he set me up. Prior to my trial, Chris admitted to 2 people that I wasn't involved in the murder. In late August or early September 1999, Chris told a man named Manuel Littlejohn that Julius didn't do it, and Julius wasn't there. Chris admitted to Manuel that he tried to frame me by wrapping the gun used to commit the crime in a bandana and hiding it in my house. Chris also told Manuel about his secret side deal with prosecutors, telling him I'm going to do 15 years and go home.
Why didn't the police conduct DNA testing years ago? Why didn't they search Chris and Liddell's homes in the aftermath of the crime? And what might they have found had they done so? Why didn't the police thoroughly investigate obvious suspects in this case, Chris, Liddell, Kermit, and maybe others, instead of secretly giving them sweet deals to point the finger at me? Tunnel vision set in. Why was a racist juror who prejudged my guilt allowed to convict and sentence me to die? I'm facing execution even though I didn't kill Mr. Howell, and the answers to these questions are still unanswered. For all these reasons, I'm asking that the board and Governor Stitt spare my life and commute my sentence to time served.
I feel horrible for Mr. Howell and his family. I should have never helped Liddell move the Suburban, and I would not have done so if I knew what truly had happened. I wish I had talked to the police. I've been haunted by those terrible decisions every day for the past 20 years. I know Liddell and Chris framed me to save themselves, but I absolutely did not commit this crime, and I was wrongfully convicted.
I am innocent. I did not commit the crime that I was convicted of. At the time Mr. Howell was shot, I was at my parents' house with my family, miles away. I did not commit, did not witness, was not at, and had nothing to do with Mr. Howell's murder. Despite that, my overworked, underpaid, and inexperienced trial lawyers failed to adequately investigate my alibi, failed to present helpful evidence, and didn't call a single member of my family to testify that I was at home with them on the night of the crime. In fact, my lawyers simply rested after the state finished this case without presenting any evidence or a single witness, including me. At the very last minute, they advised me not to testify. Until that time, I had every intention of testifying and understood the importance of my testimony to my innocence defense.
I'm asking that my life be spared and my sentence be commuted to time served for several reasons. I am innocent.